Hi, I'm Megan, welcome to my channel, and in this video today I'm going to be sharing how to make hair scrunchies. And I'm going to be sharing how to make 3 different sizes. So first up, I'm going to be sharing how to make a standard size hair scrunchie, and then I'm also going to show you how to make a little mini hair scrunchie, and then I'm also going to show you how to make a big mama jamma jumbo scrunchie. So these are all made exactly the same way. The only difference is how big you cut your fabric and how big you cut your elastic and whether you do a little top stitching around the edges or not. But that's the only difference between all of these scrunchies, and it comes down to your preference on what you want to do. So without further ado, let me show you how I made these. For this project, I'm using some scrap fabric from a previous project. The fabric that I'm using is 100% cotton. You can use whatever kind of fabric you want, but I would recommend something that doesn't stretch. For the mini scrunchie, cut a rectangle 24 inches or 61 centimeters by 3 inches or about 7.5 centimeters. For the standard scrunchie, cut a rectangle 30 inches or about 76 centimeters by 4 inches or about 10 centimeters. And for the extra large scrunchie, cut a rectangle 44 inches or about 112 centimeters by 6 inches or about 15 centimeters. Then for the elastic, for the standard and extra large scrunchie, cut your elastic to 10 inches or about 25.5 centimeters. And for the mini scrunchie, cut your elastic to about 8 inches or about 20 centimeters. You can use 1/4 inch elastic or 3/8 inch elastic or even 1/2 inch elastic. It's really down to what your preference is. Regardless of the size scrunchie that you're making, you're going to fold the fabric right sides together and then sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance along the short edge. So I've got my 3 sizes here, and what you've done now is sewn your fabric rectangles into tubes. What you're going to want to do is move the seam that you just sewed to the center of the tube. And then we're going to take the top layer of the tube and fold it up and down and in half into the middle of the tube like so. And then we are going to take the bottom edge of the back layer and fold it up and over so right sides are together like this. And you'll see everything that we folded up is neatly tucked in here between the layers of fabric. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and sew this edge. Sew again at a 1/2 inch or a centimeter seam allowance along the raw edge. And then when we get to the end, we're going to pull the part of the fabric that we folded up and tucked in out. We're going to grab the inside layer with one hand and then the outside layer with the other hand, and we are going to pull the inside layer out. So we got our inside layer there. We're going to tuck it back in. The outside layer, we're going to line our edges up nicely, and then again keep sewing at that 1/2 inch 1 centimeter seam allowance. And when we get to the bottom there again, we're going to use one hand to pull the inner fabric out and use the other hand to pull the outer fabric back. And then again tuck that fabric in and then keep sewing down the edge. And then when we get back to where we started, we're just going to leave about a 2 inch, 4-ish centimeter opening to turn the fabric right side out later. And then I'm just showing you here with the mini scrunchie, it's the same process. Okay, so we have our 3 sizes now sewn into tubes of fabric, and we're going to turn these right side out. So reach your fingers into that opening and then pull this tube right side out. Here's what it'll look like. just gonna turn these ones right side out as well. Okay, now we're gonna go in with the elastic. So I got my 10-inch long piece of elastic. I'm going in with a safety pin and pinning the safety pin to one end of that elastic. And then we're going to go into the little opening that we left. I'm hanging on tight with one hand so the elastic doesn't get lost inside of the scrunchie. And I'm just threading the safety pin with the elastic all the way through to the other end. All right, take that safety pin off when we get to the other side, and you have your two tails here. Now, some people prefer to overlap their tails and then sew them back and forth a few times. For scrunchies, I just like to tie mine in a knot. So I'm just tying a really tight triple knot, and then you have a couple tails here. You can cut them off with scissors if you like. They don't really bother me. So I'm just gonna tuck those back in and give everything a good fluff. And then the last thing to do is gonna be sewing this opening closed. So what we can do is either pinch it closed and just sew it shut, or we can pinch it closed and then top stitch all the way around the scrunchie, which will create a nice finished edge, but also close that opening at the same time. So for the mini scrunchie, I'm just gonna stitch this closed, back stitch at the beginning, sew down, back stitch at the end. Here's what that looks like. Give it a nice fluff. And there you go. Now for the two bigger scrunchies, I'm gonna top stitch all the way around. So start at the one edge of the opening, close to the edge, sew all the way around. You'll notice that I'm pinching the fabric close to the seam and wiggling my fingers back and forth to get the seam to lay nice and flat. And I'm just sewing with a really narrow seam allowance all the way around the scrunchie until I get back to where I started. And then I'm doing the same thing with my standard size scrunchie. All right, give everything a good fluff. And then there we go. My 3 scrunchies are done. What do you guys think? And that's it. I'm really happy with how these turned out. I will wear all 3 of these. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. For more videos like this one, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!